And we are live here, everybody. Thank you guys so much for chiming in live in our replay. It's Wardy here, and we're breaking down our latest Big Mets update segment to each and every one of you on this fine December 17th evening here north of 9 p.m. Eastern that we're kicking start this one. We have a lot to break down on the latest with the Mets and their active pursuit of one, if not multiple starters, potentially both via the trade market. In tonight's show, we're going to highlight all the latest rumblings in connection to our latest reports that we've broken down the channel with Luis Castillo along with other pitching targets. Was the latest in not only the Mets' pursuit of Castillo but other targets out there now that Garrett Crochet is off the board. In the free agent front, how are the Mets faring in their pursuit of bringing back the Simone southbound Sean Manaea, potentially landing a short-term option in Walker Buehler? Could Corbin Burnsby have potentially, or is that still what feels like, again, far from a certain type thing? We're going to deep dive that along with Pete Alonso. What's the latest in the polar bear? You guys want to see him back in Queens. So do I. We have some updates to get into on to where the Mets stand with him and compare/contrast to Alex Bregman, as the Mets are one of multiple teams actively pursuing the multi-time World Series champion and the Gold Glover from the 2024 campaign. And also get into some other tidbits from the last time that we went live, everybody, because pretty sure the last time was at least 4 days ago or so, so I appreciate the patience. I should have let you guys know in advance that I'd be taking this long, but I didn't think it would be this long until our next live stream. But we are here right now to break down how the Mets made some signings over the past 24 hours or so. We did a quick video yesterday on the platform as I was roaming around Manhattan for the day there. Had a very fun day for various reasons, but still check out that little quick recap if you haven't. We're going to expand on that move and the other moves the Mets have made since, and ultimately, what are the next moves for David Stearns and the Mets this offseason? You know, they made a move not long ago, and Clay Holmes, who we're going to begin today's discussion with, getting into Clay Holmes' presser today, why the Mets have optimism in him as a starter. How does he feel being stretched back as a starter for the first time since the 2018 season or so? We're going to deep dive it all right here, right now. But thank you guys so much for chiming in. I appreciate it. Let's do a roll call and then go from there. I don't know what's going on in the chat, Shock, but I'm going to tell you right now to pump the brakes before anything bananas gets happening in the chat. Thank you so much for that. Yoshima, great member with a $5 holla, says, Yankees continue to get free handouts and we still own them. Absolutely. We'll talk about the Yankees and their active pursuit of other players, not after landing just Devin Williams a couple days ago, but now we find out that they have landed the perfect Juan Soto replacement, to them at least, and that is Cody Bellinger. Belly will highlight that and plenty more in the show, everybody, but let's do the roll call. Odd Villain, how you doing? Stony, great member. Andres, Milo, Butch, Chalk, Al, Pro, how you doing? Mr. Chicken, T, James, Seth, Alberto, great member. Malone, Kish, great member. Frank, how you doing? John, how you doing? Team LI Skateboarding, how are you? Corey, my man. Frank, let's see. Straight Talk with Jack Graham, how are you? David, Eddie C, how are you, brother? Great member. Riel, White Mike, Jay is a salad, great member. My man, Dave Kaplitz, I know I got to get to the P.O. Box. Dave, thank you so much for the support, and thank you so much for being an amazing friend here on the platform. Merry Christmas to you and yours as well. Joseph, going up the list here. Eddie C, if I didn't say him already. Eli, Devin, let's go up the list here. Anthony, Darius, Pro, Truman Quinn, going up here and make sure I didn't miss anyone. Dominic, great member as well. Dominic Oliveira for a long time. Frank Perez, Eli, thank you guys. Patrick, Andre, and Roger, you guys are absolutely amazing. I appreciate you spending some of your evening or whenever you're watching this with me. It really does mean a lot. But all right, guys, let's kickstart this one and let's get into the first big news, which has to do with the key takeaways from Clay Holmes' presser today. I'm not going to be long-winded with this. We're just going to go over some key quotes that Clay Holmes shared himself today. I'm going to reference what Clay Holmes is hoping to do in this upcoming year for the Mets, why David Stearns and everyone else and this Mets brass has optimism and Clay Holmes and everything in between. So we're going to talk from Clay, then we'll go from there into the latest on the trade rumblings, and then we'll get into the free agent targets, the Mets signings that they have done over the past day or so, and getting into each and every one of your questions if I haven't gotten a chance to answer them already. Obviously, Polar Bear Pete Alonso will be a big bulk of discussion at some point too. But Clay Holmes doesn't necessarily view the Mets and the Yankees as rivals. Let's hear Clay's thoughts on the following.
I mean, personally, I don't see it so much as, a rival, like you're switching sides. I don't know. I don't really view it as too much of like a competition thing. And obviously I've seen, New York up close and personal. I love the city. I've seen the Mets fans just from, right across the city, just the energy and passion and how much they care, what they bring, to the fan base. And, that's something that, I want to be a part of. I think, being able to stay in New York City and join the Mets and what's being built there, and hopefully keep this momentum going is something that drew me there, I would say, versus, feeling so much like it's a competition, like I'm, switching sides. But like I said, I'm super pumped just to stay in New York and be here with the Mets. As a player, I may not always show it, not a ton of emotion, but, I care a lot, just about, the game and my craft and what I can be, and the teammate I am. And I think, with the Mets fans, that level of care is matched. And I think, as a player, when you feel that kind of reciprocated, it's really all you can ask for. It makes winning that much sweeter. And so super pumped to be here and join this organization.
So I like that Clay emphasized how, he's heard obviously how the Mets have been operating and trending in the right direction. And it's crazy how even when we have players, again, reaffirm to us, how things are different now and the viewpoint is continuing to change positively in favor of the Mets organization, how yet we still have fans out there. And Chris, I want you to know, Chris, that this is not me outing you. I'm just referencing your comment because this brings a greater point that I like to share that's separate here a bit from Clay Holmes before we get to more of his remarks. But it has everything to do with the fan point of view that a lot of you guys have had so far this offseason, which is the following. Since Juan Soto's landed with the Mets haven't done anything of true significance in your eyes. So because of that reason, we're going to be beyond frustrated by it. Guys, I'm sorry, but do I need to remind you that you're not Yankees fans? Can we stop with this self-entitlement or, with this short-term, reaction in the sense of, all right, we got Soto, now what is the next thing right away? As if more moves are inevitably coming. I mean, a big part of today's show and our discussion that we do nightly is on the moves that are inevitably coming from the Mets next. And I just still cannot get over fans out there that have any audacity to be frustrated at the Mets' lack of moves as if they are not going to do more. I mean, we had Malone, prime schmuck of the day. Love you, Malone, but you deserve in the chat for this one for saying Stearns is sitting on his hands. Guys, just because you see the Yankees, after losing out on Juan Soto, make consecutive moves over the past 72 hours or so, does not mean that the Mets are not going to be making their own fair share of moves. And I really think as a fan base, we need to take a step back and appreciate how grateful we are to have Steve Cohen as an owner and how things are trending in the right direction. For any fan to have any audacity on anything outside of just impatience, because we're always impatient, especially in today's society. We can't handle anything after waiting for more than 2 seconds. I get it, but come on, let's buck up. We're not kiddos here. The Mets are going to make more moves. They will make more moves before we get on to actually Christmas itself. They'll make more moves before we reach the new year. And when we have reached the new year, you know what's going to happen after that? The Mets are going to make more moves. Color me shocked. Who would have thought about that, right? And I know you want the polar bear and Pete Alonso back. I know that some of you guys really like Alex Bregman. I know that some of you guys would really like some rotation pieces. Absolutely. But what is also true is that in order for these things to happen, they need to materialize. And these negotiations are not being sped up in any camp for a good reason. I don't think there's any player that the Mets have truly lost out on in this market. Obviously, there's some guys I certainly would have liked, but the reason why the Mets didn't land wasn't necessarily for a lack of effort in every pursuit, i.e. Garrett Crochet, for example, but it happened. So again, for all my Mets fans out there, please remember, Juan Soto's on your team. Stop acting like Juan Soto signed up to be with the Mets outside of, $800+ million with total value of the contract, that he didn't have confidence in the future of this organization led by Steve Cohen and David Stearns. Would really be great if we can get out of this notion of, oh my goodness gracious, we're just going to sit on our hands and, oh, Sleepy Stearns is at it again. Guys, this first year here, we got 2 games shy of the dance. Doesn't matter on how we got there, we got there. And that had a lot to do with Stearns' implementation and hands on the team as year went on. So I don't want to hear from any fan that's going to come in here and act like, oh, we're done making moves. Please just get a clue, pay attention. And if you're a follower of mine as well daily, you should know better. Because honestly, we have had a pretty good track record as of recent, not only with the acquisition of Juan Soto, which we've been calling for over a year now on the platform, but other guys that the Mets have now been reportedly linked to that were otherwise not reportedly linked to, that we speculated on the platform have held on to be true. It doesn't mean the Mets are going to land every player player that they're connected to. Again, when you're dealing with a big market club, they show interest in a lot of players. And unlike smaller market clubs, every time that a name like the Mets is connected to a player of any significance, they are going to be relayed in endless different forms of media to be perpetuated out there right away, either for an agent gain or just for the media aspect because they are the Mets. So, as I cover every big and small move, every big and small reported target the Mets have, please know that, again, we're not rocket scientists. We all understand common sense. They're not going to pick up every player they're connected to. But it doesn't mean that they're not going to land some of those guys, because they certainly will, like they did with Soto, like they did with Jesse Winker back at the trade deadline, like what they may certainly do with other players outside of Frankie Montas, who not many people called, but I know my man James Shiano really wished it into existence and it became a reality, so I'll give him the kudos for that. Brandon, thank you so much for the endless support. Soto Sasaki 2025. I would love me some rookie Sasaki, 1,000%. I'm losing my mind waiting for the season to start. What are you guys doing to pass the time? For me, it's covering the Mets every day, so that's what makes it easy for me for time to pass. And that's, I think, also why I don't get as cooped up with the impatience, because I have a role to play not only as a fan but also as a creator to pump out consistent content for you guys on anything and everything regarding the team that I can find and also want to notably cover. I can understand how you guys can get a short fused rather when nothing happens with the Mets after a big splash, but please bear in mind that these big splashes happen in hand because of the other moves the Mets make. So as the Mets make more inevitable moves, know that that's going to happen. And remember that the next time you have a future offseason where you're freaking out why the Mets aren't doing anything, they're not sitting on their hands. They're just being diligent. The reason why they haven't pounced on the starting pitching market, we're going to highlight very shortly after the Clay Holmes remarks, as well as Polar Bear Pete Alonso. Why is Manaea and Polar Bear Pete Alonso still on the market? For multiple reasons, and we're going to highlight all that in tonight's show. Thank you guys so much. Again, I'm very happy to have each and every one of you. You guys are absolutely amazing to be here. Smash a like and subscribe button if you haven't already, if you enjoy our content. Shout out to BetUS, America's #1 sportsbook, but we'll get into them a little bit later, folks. Before we get there, let's talk more on the latest remarks from Clay Holmes himself.
What made the Mets the right fit for this challenge of going back to being a starting pitcher?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of reasons here that, the Mets, drew me in. For one, I think, the leadership here, it starts with, the Cohen family and David Stearns and, Carlos Mendoza. I think just seeing their leadership and their vision, their belief is definitely something that, was very appealing. I think the culture here is, they've created is something that I think, people want to be a part of, and there's real momentum here.
What made the Mets the right fit for this challenge of going back to being a starting pitcher?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of reasons here.
So something that I'm really happy to get into here when it comes to Clay Holmes becoming a starter is the familiarity, right? He highlights the culture and what the Mets are building. But what have I preached to you guys time and time again, going back throughout the course of the season, as Jeremy Hefner made me eat my words from the first half where I was frustrated and realized that Hef Dog is still the man in certain aspects for sure. It hasn't been for lack of effort in the Mets' heavy attempts with their pitching lab and how much that has blossomed over the past couple years under Cohen. And Holmes, who already has the familiarity to a degree with Carlos Mendoza during their time in the Bronx, has a great familiarity now with their assistant pitching coach from the Yankees, the Mets, and Desi Driscoll. That alone gave the Mets such an advantage in landing Holmes because of that respective familiarity. Now you add in Jeremy Hefner, what they plan to continue to work on with his arsenal. I think that is a very exciting thing. So in the case of Clay Holmes, I'm really excited to see how this is all going to pan out because, as we stated from the beginning, if it works out, the Mets have themselves a formidable starter in the heart of this rotation. And if it doesn't work out, then they have themselves a pretty good and maybe a slight overpay of a reliever there to potentially set up Edwin Diaz. Either way, I don't really think you're shaking your head if you're a Mets fan, unless Clay Holmes goes out there and completely plummets in every aspect of the game that we simply don't have as something we can even comprehend in our heads right now. But gotta love that from Clay, everybody.
Of the idea of you signing somewhere as a starter, how far back you had been thinking about this, and maybe what those initial discussions were like with teams.
Definitely, appreciate it. Excited to be here. With the Mets. Yeah, it was something that I've always kind of had in the back of my mind. I would say, throughout my career. Obviously there was a little bit of interest, even way back when, like at the end of 2020, like going overseas to be a starter. That somewhat excited me. So I think it's, something that's always been there for me. And even throughout this year, I think just kind of out of fun, my bullpens, I was, throwing a change up, throwing a four seam, just to kind of keep things, fun and light. And I think, out of that, kind of realizing, what could be of an arsenal, there was, jokes and talks about throughout the year. And, toward the end of the year, there's definitely some like, hey, like, what if this happens type thing. And then, early in the offseason, I was kind of met with a few teams that, had some interest. And I think it kind of really opened the door for a more serious conversation. And it's something that my agent and I had. And it's something that I think at the end of the day, it was like, if this opportunity is here, I think, I didn't want to look back, at the end of my career and say, man, what could have come from that? And I think it was something that, still, deep down I had, passion for it and excited me and, very thankful for, this opportunity that's come here with the Mets, get to stay here in New York and be with the Mets to, pursue this opportunity. I don't think there's a better place. So super excited.
So Clay Holmes, very excited to be a Met and very excited to be given this opportunity as a starter. And a follow-up when Clay Holmes was asked, did the New York Yankees ever approach Holmes as coming back but returning as a starter? He simply answered no, they did not. So again, showing you the differences in vision, where I guarantee a guy like Desi Drewskull, who made a lateral move from the Yankees organization, the same Yankees that were a couple wins shy of a World Series this past year, he decided to upright and leave solely because of the fact that he wanted to be in the Mets organization and everything that they had building in their own respective pitching lab to pair with Jeremy Hefner as the main pitching coach there. And that's so exciting to me because clearly the Mets are building a formula that's going to have success, and clearly the Mets are having not necessarily just an out-of-box way of thinking in their player performance, but also a strategic way of thinking. This is not sloppy or you're just throwing a bunch of things at the wall and hoping that something sticks. No, they're strategic and they're reasoning as to why Clay Holmes, with that heavy sinker usage, one of the best sinkers in the game when it's right. For Holmes, it's about making sure that he's not walking the ballpark when he's not getting rattled, but I also think not being thrown in a high leverage situation every single time to start a game, this time as a starter instead of a closing reliever there before he lost that job to Luke Weaver this past year for the Yanks. Holmes is really going to be able to settle in and really exacerbate properly, I should say, that arsenal with that changeup, with that forcing fastball, things that he's toyed with, but have been more on the back burner for him, especially that changeup. I wonder how much more he can utilize and kind of refine, retool things there with the pitching lab and what they have brewing. And one final remark that I have from Clay Holmes today, which I would love to share with each and every one of you, is what could we expect from Clay Holmes in 2025, sample size wise? Well, Clay Holmes said it himself today, so let's hear it from the horse's mouth.
Addition to a starter and start throwing more pitches?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think the biggest thing is just the monitoring. It's hard to just put arbitrary numbers on things and say if you hit this number, I mean, that's all you can handle. I don't so much believe in that. I think there's definitely things that you need to monitor to see, how your body's holding up and the strength and some mobility things. But, my intention going in is, to throw 160 innings. I want to throw as many innings as I can. Obviously, you want to do that safely, and there are things to monitor to make sure, those innings and when you're out there is done correctly, and there's not too much risk put on it. But I have a lot of confidence in the training staff there. I mean, just conversations and tests I've already done with them. There are things that we've already identified that could be really big for me. So that was a big thing going into it, just knowing that there's very kind of how they see the workload and kind of how they want to monitor it was appealing to me, just because they kind of believe that as long as things in my body stays in a good spot, I'm good to keep throwing. And I think that's something that, obviously I take a lot of pride in, but, obviously, I want to go out there for as many innings as I can. I don't want to put just a cap on it. So, excited to get to work with that group and do all I can to throw as many as I can.
Clay Holmes has unfinished business, eerily similar to Seth Lugo, which is why the Mets ultimately lost out on him a couple years ago to go to San Diego and then become a Cy Young caliber pitcher for the Kansas City Royals. Given that opportunity to become a starter again is something that Lugo really wanted to maximize and didn't want to end his career thinking, well, it could have been. Clay Holmes has that same sentiment, so much so that a really fun fact about Clay Holmes is how he has worked his body regimen year by year has already been on a starter-esque level. He has already built a regiment where he can handle north of 100-plus innings if he would have to. Now he's hoping to at least have 160 or so for the Mets next season. Just to give you guys, a point of reference, Luis Severino last year had 180 innings for the Mets, right around that range. First time since 2018 he pitched that much in a single season. Clay Holmes, who hasn't been a starter since the 2017-2018 realm during his tenure with the Pittsburgh Pirates, he's now being stretched as a starter yet again. And I have a great idea and a great feeling that Clay Holmes might just be one of the better starters out of all the National League East next season. And yes, this biasly goes in hand with the successes that we have seen of other reliever turned starters, whether they have been the Garrett Crochets to a higher magnitude, whether they have been to a certain magnitude the Littells there from the Tampa Bay Rays, or whether they have been the Seth Lugos, even though that he already had a couple years of being an established starter with the Mets, going back to the Juice Baseball era when that was a thing there till the end of 2019 season. We look at Michael Caine during his time with the Yankees, his former teammate there, and now San Diego Padres, another Cy Young caliber starter. Ronaldo Lopez, who I will say was originally a starter and was stretched out as a starter for a couple years with the White Sox, he ultimately became a starter again and was Cy Young caliber in the first half before injury with the Atlanta Braves. The point I'm trying to make is that this recipe has worked for teams, especially as long as they have been smart about the regimen. And for Holmes, it's going to be about his health naturally, make sure that he stays toe-to-toe and can handle, say, giving the Mets 5, 6, maybe even 7 innings out there at times if he can really be full-fledged stretched out there. And while there's been this long-lasting understanding and belief that the Mets are going to go with a 6-man rotation, it doesn't change the fact that Clay Holmes has a genuine ability to go out there and to give the Mets quality innings this season to a greater magnitude that we've even seen in his career up until this point. So let's get back into this one, everybody, and break down the latest. You can't wait. You got to move fast like a sliver. Here's the thing, though. Again, I'm fine with the Mets being strategic about how they're going about the offseason as long as they still land the players they want to land. And both in the trade and the free agent market, there are endless players that I would like the Mets to land. They have reportedly been connected to that they would like to land, which is all the more reason as to why you should believe that they will inevitably be making more moves. The same way I told you guys time and time again, the Mets are the favorites for Soto in many ways. This is why you should have optimism. I'm not going to tell you it's a slam dunk, but I feel confident he's going to come here. Thankfully, my confidence, hasn't wavered, and nor has the Mets in their attempts and their abilities to land the players that we actually want them to land. So all I will say is, while I understand the impatience in general that comes with today's society, also understand the greater good, which is what David Stearns, Steve Cohen, and everyone else in co will be doing in this holiday season. They're not done making moves. They're going to be working their tail off even when their families are busy with the holidays to a degree, because they got to know, they don't got to know, they do know that they have more moves that they have to make for this team, and for good reason. So now, folks, getting on from talking about Clay Holmes, I do want to touch briefly on a couple moves the Mets have made over the past day. I'm super shaking my head. I'm sorry to hear that, Noda. I'm not exactly sure why. But let's get back into this one now. We'll talk about the signings a bit, and then we will highlight the latest in the trade market headlined by Luis Castillo, and then the free agent market with not only the pitching options, but the offensive options, because we do have some updates on Polar Bear Pete Alonso, where things stand there, Alex Bregman, the pursuit of his or lack thereof at this point in time, and everything in between. But let's get on with the signings, because there is a signing that the Mets made too. And speaking of moves, by the way, New York Yankees, you guys see that they have officially acquired Cody Bellinger today for one reliever, which felt like such a fleece job yet again for the Yankees, especially in trades with the Cubs. They tend to be fleece jobs at times. But we also see that Cody Bellinger, his current wife, is also the former partner of Giancarlo Stanton. I have no right to, or any remark to say in judgment here. All I'm going to say is it is an interesting dynamic, and I am genuinely curious. Like, for watching this from like a drama point of view in any way, shape, or form, I'm genuinely curious to know like what the current status of Giancarlo's relationship with her is, if at all, like if they're friendly or not. I think it's adding, bad blood, because will that transfer over at all in the clubhouse? Again, I'm grasping at straws with this one. I understand that. I'm just making note of it because it is one of the rarer things that you normally see when a player is acquired to a team. Not many times you hear publicly, at least, that player's active wife was also the previous partner of his fellow teammate. And again, not that it doesn't happen, because it does from time to time. A lot more times not in the public eye than what you know, but just want to emphasize that for a second. Jonathan, thank you so much for the donation. Both you and my guy Alberto have themselves a donation that we're going to answer in a second. But before we do, let's get on now to the latest moves that the Mets made that I want to highlight with each and every one of you. Give me one more second to do exactly that. First of all, we see the Mets are signing Brandon Waddell to a minor league deal per Robert Murray. This came out yesterday. The only reason why I didn't chomp at a bit to make a video of it is because, one, it's a minor league deal, and two, I was still in New York at the time of this video happening. So the only reason why I did that quick reaction of the other move that we're going to highlight further in a second is because that's a major league deal with a split contract. So a little bit more meaning. Not that this one can't be a nice pickup for the Mets, because I'm always optimistic when it comes to David Stearns adding arms of guys I never heard of. And this is going to be Brandon Waddell, who again has 11 years of MLB experience there under his belt that we know. He also has played there with the Pirates, Twins, Orioles, and Cardinals from 2020 to 2021. And after 23 games in AAA in 2022, Waddell has pitched in 55 games internationally in the KBO and CPBL from 2022 to 2024. Expanding more on Waddell here, that we see going back to his 2024 numbers in 14 starts, 75 innings here for Waddell. We are looking at a 3.12 ERA. Pretty solid numbers there. 3.12 ERA, a 9K per 9 to a 1.3 walks per 9. And in 2023, in over 100 innings, he posted a 2.49 ERA, a 9K, just under a 9K per 9 to 2.5 walks per 9. Whereas the K to walk ratio was fantastic this year in the KBO. Interestingly, about the southpaw, the Mets picked up in Waddell here, who will be competing for potentially a bullpen spot, if not, a number 6, number 7 starter type impact. I like the impact of this guy more so as a reliever than a starter, with his craftiness, his multi-pitch mix as a lefty, and he's had his success that we've seen at the KBO level, but I take it with a grain of salt to a degree, only because KBO is not along the same lines of the Nippon Pro Baseball League, the MPB there in Japan. That is the largest and most prominent league for baseball, not named MLB, and then I would probably classify KBO after that in that kind of realm. But even then, it's still been impressive to see the success he's had. His AAA success as well has been pretty solid from the numbers I'm currently looking at as well. And his MLB success, he hasn't had much at the MLB level to really look at. And 12.2 innings of 5.6 ERA, again, that's nothing. He's completely changed his arsenal. He's changed a lot of things about his game since going over there to the KBO. So add another arm, this time a crafty lefty to the mix, and Brandon Waddell, who's going to have that starter type mix to throw your way into this Mets pen potentially as they compete this spring training. So Waddell, add him to the list. He is signed to a minor league deal, and no, it is not something I think anyone should be going bananas over or thinking that, oh my god, the Mets just landed their final rotation piece this offseason. Please understand the context of depth moves and the difference between them and what you plan to do to still fill out your major league roster. But let's get into the other move the Mets made that we saw over this past day or so. So bear with me 1 second. And we see here that they have acquired Jared Young that you guys see. Now, Jared Young, we highlighted a little bit on the channel yesterday. To just expand on this more, Jared Young has played pretty much every single position in professional baseball, not named center field or catcher. Young, who's right around the age of 29, 30 or so, is a veteran utility man who split last season that we saw there in the KBO. So another player coming from the KBO. And funny enough, was teammates of the same Waddell from the KBO. So the Mets signed 2 teammates there during their time in the Korean Baseball League last season. You have to wonder, how much scouting did the Mets do in the KBO? That's one thing that I'm actually bearing in mind, because it is kind of interesting for them to sign back-to-back guys, teammates there, both from the same team. He split half the season there in the KBO, the other half in AAA. In the KBO, he posted right around 10-plus home runs with over 1,000 OPS. In AAA, he posted around 10-plus home runs with an over 900 OPS. So pretty even split split of a guy who throughout his AAA numbers has been in the 17 to 21 range echelon of home runs. Again, a guy that can play all over the place, currently labeled as a first baseman, but he has reps at second. He has experience at third. He has experience at short, all over the outfield, not named center field, obviously. And a veteran option on a major league split contract, meaning that if he does crack the Mets teams, think of like, this is like a Zach Short, basically, is the best way that I would attribute this to, but potentially better upside. One, he's utility man that plays all over the place. Two, all of his numbers at the professional level are good. They're pretty impressive. You know, if you exclude his very little sample size at the major league level, because there really isn't much to be had there since, you know, he was in AAA and the KBO this past season. He has a little taste at the MLB level with a little to show for it, but he has been a high contact hitter and honestly a good gap-to-gap hitter as well, getting on base at a strong clip, hitting the 270 to 285 plus range, if not 300s, that we've seen at the professional level in the minor leagues and throughout the KBO. So the Mets picked up him as a utility option to try to crack the team out of camp. So I would put him in the same class as a Danny Mendick from a couple years ago, as Zach Short from this past year with potential higher upside. If he cracks the team out of camp, then he has incentives which could bring him to a $7-figure amount, but that will go in hand with his playing time and actually cracking the team. But at absolute worst, you sign a guy that will begin the year there in AAA if he doesn't opt out of his deal, if the Mets don't just cut him outright. And at absolute best, he performs above expectations, is a Swiss Army knife of a utility man for you off the bench, and what could be a guy that maybe has a say in trying to outplay other guys trying to land these utility roles that are rookies in the Luis Angel Acuñas, the Ryan Mauricios, among others, because the Mets like their in-house options of guys that are coming off the bench, but they also don't want all of them to necessarily come off the bench because it may hurt their development not playing every day. That's where the Mets are looking for some stopgap options. I certainly am in favor of them trying to bring in there, that being in Jose Iglesias back with the Mets. I think that goes without saying. But yes, these are the smaller moves the Mets have made as of late. If you're asking, depending on the fan you talk to, these small moves may have been the biggest moves in Major League Baseball, because I know you guys love to rag on David Stearns, even after David continues to do things that I firmly believe are right for the organization and to have strategic and smart spending. But again, to each their own. We'll see who's more right in the end. So far, round one goes to me. Throughout year one at Stearns, we'll see how round two goes now with Juan Soto, right? But all right, guys, so that's the latest there on their moves. Let's get into everything that has to do with the pitching market, because we know the Mets have been tagged to pitchers. This is not, again, shocking here whatsoever. And in the case of Luis Castillo, who we have covered on the platform as well, this man has been in great discussion. But there actually is one man out there that I would like to highlight just briefly before we talk more on Castillo, because him, Alonso, and Manaea are going to really take up the entire second half of our live stream today, everybody, is the following. The Mets, according to our guy Pat Ragazzo there, shout out to Pat on the beat for the Mets through an affiliate of Sports Illustrated, says the Mets have shown interest in pitcher Griffin Canning. Now, as some people initially reacted to this news, they said, oh my God, we want Griffin Canning as our final rotation piece. No, please understand context. Griffin Canning would be nothing more than likely as, say, a number 7 starter for you, number 6, number 7 of a guy that's better suited probably as a multi-in reliever, or as a guy that could refine his arsenal a little bit that the Mets still may use out of that 6-man rotation at the 6th spot, essentially. But Canning is a guy that I'd imagine would sign on potentially a minor league contract, would invite to spring trading, if not a little bit more. He would get a guaranteed deal if he doesn't sign with the Mets. I feel confident saying that because he still has youth on his side. Similar to guys in Michael Soroka, for example, the Mets have also been connected to. And Canning hasn't done anything overly sexy at the MLB level at all. But again, he's 28 years of age. He's just getting his innings finally started. This past season threw 171 when he threw 127 the year prior and hadn't pitched beyond 90 from his rookie season. So the innings has fluctuated throughout his young career, but the Angels also don't know how to handle pitching if it smacked them across the face. So nothing in Anaheim should be taken with more than a grain of salt. I will stand by that. They have no effing clue what they're doing in the pitching front. A 5.1 ERA and a 4.7 expected ERA has the kitchen sink of an arsenal that he can throw at you. What the Mets would be getting in Canning is another multi-innings either, a guy who's young, who has upside, and truly a guy who I see some similarities where the Mets want to utilize as a multi-inning reliever. They certainly can as that kind of bull guy. Maybe like a Sean Reed Foley Espo when we're upside here, better pure stuff. Or, you think of other starters that were more failed starters of recent, and you wonder how they'd be better suited as a reliever, because he's fluctuated as a starter and reliever throughout his career, more so as a starter he's been than anything else. But then we look at guys like a former New York Yankee, an example, or a current New York Yankee, and Luke Weaver. And Luke Weaver was this failed starter who had been around the block plenty, and then he gets an opportunity, fine-tunes his game for the Yankees, and becomes a closer just like that. Now they have Devin Williams apparel alongside him, assuming that Weaver is back with the Yankees next season. I don't know his contract status. If he's on for another year, then good for him and the Yanks. But regardless, that is a route I could see the Mets doing. Again, just because it's a name that has had north of 200 innings pitched this past season for another team does not mean that the Mets would be trying to acquire him for the exact same reason. This dude really hypes up every little thing. No, I'm not hyping up anything. I'm informing you guys. That's another thing too that I'd like to relay. Please don't think that I'm trying to tell you guys that this is the best thing since sliced bread with these things. I'm just telling you the upside and breaking them down. Because as a content creator who covers every aspect of the Mets, you have to realize that I'm going to cover everything small and big, because some of these smaller level moves the Mets make will have greater importance throughout the course of the season that we're not talking about right now, because we're not really thinking about how much the bullpen is going to change throughout the course of the year. Inevitable injuries that happen in the rotation. Might as well spearhead that now, kind of know the ins and outs about a player, so that way I'm not caught off guard when they inevitably are called up, when they inevitably impact the Mets, whether it's for a cup of coffee for 48 hours, and then they're DFA'd and traded elsewhere, or if they impact the Mets for, say, 3+ weeks and have themselves a nice run because of injuries or because of inconsistencies to other aspects of the roster. You just can't, as much as we can sit here and try to predict what the future of the Mets is going to be, we can never properly predict how the course of the 162 is going to go when it comes to ailments and things of that nature. So that is why we emphasize everything the way we do. Ricky, I love you, brother. Happy to have you in here. I would love to Grom, but I don't see a chance that Allie's coming back, nor do I see the Mets going down that route. I think the last thing the Mets need is to go after a injury-riddled, aging starter. If they haven't learned anything from Scherzer and Verlander, then they're going to trade for DeGrom right now. But if they've learned anything, then that right there should tell you what will happen, even if it comes at a lesser price, because you'd be taking on most of Jake's money. Love DeGrom. I'd be ecstatic if we brought him back. No, I do not foresee it to happen. All right, guys, let's talk a bit. Let's talk a bit about the starting pitching market. Shout out to my guy, Bavarian Mets fan here, who clipped some things that we see from Will Salmon, who was just on the platform in our last live stream. Check it out. Will and I had a great discussion breaking down the latest in Mets land. Since then, Will came out with some pieces through The Athletic on the beat for them and stated the following. I expect the Mets to be aggressive but smart in free agency, is the case here from Will Salmon. Looking at 3-4 year deals, Mets looking at a modest approach, and Mets again will remain aggressive. That is true. And we also know reportedly that the Mets are amongst teams that are potentially aggressively pursuing Luis Castillo. And we have highlighted Luis Castillo to a great magnitude on the platform as of late, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse there. You guys know Luis Castillo's good. I know Luis Castillo's good. I know he's absolutely nasty, and I know that fastball would play up so well in the pitcher's park here at Citi Field. So, in the case of Castillo, where the Mets stand right now, I think things are continuing to potentially trend in their favor as long as they don't have to put themselves in a position where we have to drastically overpay. Because what we did here is that the Mets were not willing to go the lengths that it would have taken to land Garrett Crochet because of just how much it would have gutted their farm. It would have gutted their farm more than I think they'd be comfortable with, meaning like a Brandon Sproat and a Jet Williams and or a Luis Angel Acuna, etc. Castillo's going to cost you something for sure, but not nearly as much on the quality wise. And at 3 years of $75 million total at $25 million average annual value, to land an ace caliber starter at that value, the same contract of newly signed with the Texas Rangers and Nathan Eovaldi, is a great thing. And yes, he does have a 4th year option that he would likely opt into, to bear that in mind. And that could also be voided depending on if he misses a certain amount of time due to injury over the next couple years under his contract. But regardless, Castillo, I firmly believe the Mets could land here even at a slight overpay, if it means with the biggest overpay being one of their top prospects going the other way. Now, when we look at what the team in return would want, that being the Seattle Mariners, they want a second baseman. It goes without saying. They're definitely going to want one of Ronnie Mauricio, Jet Williams, Luis Angel Acuna, potentially Jeff McNeil as well if we eat more of his salary. And if we take on all the salary of Luis Angel Acuna, then naturally we're going to be happy with that. And we're going to say to ourselves, okay, if we're going to take on all the salary of Castillo, rather, we're going to be happy about that and say, okay, is that going to help lessen a deal? It really won't, because the Mariners want MLB-ready talent. But the Mets, in order to land someone like Castillo, it's probably going to take, let's say, a Luis Angel Acuna-type player and maybe another piece of lesser value, right? If you had to trade Acuna and McNeil right now to Seattle, and you eat majority McNeil's contract for Castillo, would I personally do it? I would be reluctant, especially because you're losing 2 second base options there. If you're trading just a guy in Luis Angel Acuna, for example, for Castillo, would I have reluctance? Yes, just in the sense of I'm pretty optimistic on Acuna from what we saw last season. I saw his MLB debut firsthand in person there that we saw in Philly, and I got to say, you guys are absolutely ridiculous. Like, for a fan base that landed Soto, I've seen few more pessimistic than a fan base that just landed a player on the largest contract in North American sports history, and yet goes out of their way to still rag on our GM. Only Mets fans. I will tell you that. Only Mets fans. You guys are in a class of your own, and you guys are the same schmucks that'll be like, how did this happen? I never saw this coming. What do you mean this guy's as good as he is? Oh my goodness, Stearns is cooking. As you're literally wishing him the absolute worst months prior. But to each their own. The point here in Castillo is that he will not come cheap, but he will come at a cheaper value than Garrett Crochet. Trade-wise, I could see the Mets making this happen more so, especially as they're in the realm of that kind of mid-tier contracts that they're eyeing, especially in the free agent market at 3 tops 4 years. Because otherwise, if you're in the Mets, you don't want to have long-term commitment, and I don't want the Mets to have long-term commitment, right? Usually long-term commitment with starters that have already hit their peak, that are in their current primes, it's a little hard to do. And I think where the Mets currently find themselves positioned with the rotation of Kodai Senga, now Clay Holmes, no particular order, Kodai Senga, Clay Holmes, Frankie Montas, David Peterson, Tyler McGill, Paul Blackburn. List goes on from there. That's already like 6 starters I just listed, so if I could do math accordingly, which I probably can't, and that's fine. But if you want a 6-man rotation, you still want at least 8 like formidable starters, and the Mets are really only at like 5-6 range. So that's what makes Castillo most appealing. And also on top of it all, not that it's a drastic, X factor, but if you want a good clubhouse culture, you want to go about things the right way. And the Mets, as things currently stand, if I'm not mistaken, have 6 players in the organization of Dominican descent that are likely going to be on the Mets opening day roster. Should Huascar Brosban make the team out of camp, being the bullpen again, and Marte not be traded. If you lend Castillo, that is another Dominican player added to the mix, and a culture that's been very vibrant, been very colorful, and in comparison or contrast rather to, I feel like, the Yankees at times, even with Soto. I think that what I thought was initially going to be this wave of a lot of Puerto Rican descent of players over the years, especially after landing Baez a year after landing Lindor. Now it looks like it's going to be a good wave of Dominicans that we're seeing with Jose Siri as well, and all the wild stuff he's doing in the DR Winter League right now. You want guys that fit the clubhouse culture as well as the on-field product, and Castillo, I think, does that better than some other guys currently available out there. So not only from where he comes from as a Dominican, but also how great of a pitcher he is. Yes, the numbers have been on a little bit of a decline. Again, he's 31 years of age, not getting any younger. We've likely seen the best of Castillo at some point in his career, but still a Castillo right now, what we'd be getting around a 3.5 to a 3.7 or so ERA at absolute worst. I mean, you can't go wrong if you're the Mets. An ace caliber starter with a devastating fastball that's so lively, one of the harder throwers in Major League Baseball, and also a guy that if the Mets try to tap into again, has, again, one of the nastier pitches that you will see among guys when looking at the breaking and off speed, especially that curveball. When it's right, it is gorgeous. But that's something that has been utilized as much, and or the changeup. Actually, the changeup could be the one that I'm flip-flopping on. It is the changeup, because the changeup used to be his number one pitch, his perfect, get-out pitch, and now it's been in the back burner in comparison to the other aspects of his arsenal the past couple of years there in Seattle. So, Mets fans, my question each and every one of you is simply this. For Luis Castillo, how much are you willing to give up for his services? Because for me, I don't want to give up Acuna, but am I going to lose sleep over it if we give up Acuna? Probably not. No, because I'm going to be very happy with acquiring Luis Castillo and everything that he brings to this Mets team. The same way that I will be ecstatic if the Mets land some other trade options out there, and I think we're going to further highlight them on the channel in the coming days, so be on the lookout for that, folks. What I do want to say, though, is that there are some pitchers out there that are available in the trade market. Some I think make more sense than others, and we highlighted that to a degree in our last live show, but it's headlined by guys and Mitch Keller and Jared Jones from the Pittsburgh Pirates. I think Mitch Keller makes far more sense to be dealt than Jones. Jones Still a little bit injury prone, just getting his career started. I also don't like how his elbow is going to grade out being like 5'10", 5'11", and throwing as hard as he does. That's why I had the issues that he did last year going from a reliever to a starter stretch. And Jerry Jones as well. Mitch Keller, though, who we hate for the Starling Marte incident in 2022, but we can appreciate how good of a pitcher he is. I would love him via trade Keller if that could happen. You look at the Padres. They have had Dylan Cease's name thrown in there. Michael Cain already as well. Cease, I like a lot. I loved him with the White Sox. Nasty breaking ball. Love the fastball. But for Cease, again, are the Mets really going to trade for a rental? I don't see it happening as much. Same thing with Framber Valdez. Framber Valdez will be nasty in this rotation. But is David Stearns really going to be the type to go out of his way to give up some key assets for a rental starter? If he finds the right price, I guess, right? I think if he finds the right price, because if we can find a suitor that can benefit us in a way that, we aren't giving up an arm and a leg in those situations, especially for a rental or at most, 2 years. I think that's certainly not a bad route for the Mets to go down, but I know why they are far more inclined going after players like Garrett Crochet, who had at least 2 years of control and the potential of being a dominant starter in your rotation for north of the next decade. Before I talk more on these starters, everybody, make sure to smash that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. It's greatly appreciated as we break down the latest big updates here at Metsland, everybody. Help us get a 300 plus likes to our north of 1,000 live concurrent viewers. That means a lot. And to our replay viewers, help us get a 450 plus likes. That would really mean a lot too. Alberto with a donation earlier that I want to highlight, and then we'll get back into talking about these trade targets for the Mets. Roki will pick the Mets. He will not be in anyone's shadow here, and he will be very marketable in New York, LGM. Keep it up, great brother. Brother, we love what you do. Thank you so much, Alberto. Great member. I love you too, my man. Alberto Soto, what a beauty. Really appreciate that. And to answer his remarks there, I do think that there is more optimism behind the Mets landing Sasaki than what meets the eye right now. And I think as we inch closer to January 15th, when he will be making his decision right around that time, we will know. And we will be excited, hoping that he actually is still considering the Mets through the thick of it. Even if they don't land him in the end, I think the Mets are going to have a valiant effort in trying to land Sasaki, which I'm looking forward to seeing how it pans out. Even if he goes to LA or San Diego, which are the more likely landing spots right now. Jonathan with the $5 donation says, I hear Pete wants a huge contract, market not biting. Looks like he should have taken that original deal. You think he'll take a 1-year deal? Not a chance in hell he takes a 1-year deal. No. I think Alonso's still going to get enough in this market for him to not want to just do a 1-year prove-it deal. Because if he does a 1-year prove-it deal, then he's going to need to have all the stresses that he had this past year, which completely which completely shadowed over him throughout the course of the season, which is why he struggled as mightily as he did throughout the course of the year before we got to postseason play, where he finally snapped out and finally woke up and finally pushed the contract shit aside because he locked in for postseason, unlike where I feel like he really didn't lock in well throughout the regular season at all, and I think he knows that, quite literally, because of his continued struggles there. But to get back in the trade market, everybody, Luis Castillo, we just mentioned, Dylan Cease, Michael K. I don't think Kane's happening. Dylan Cease, Framber Valdez, the guys from the Pirates there, Mitch Keller and Jared Jones. Are there any other key names out there in the trade market? Jesus Luzardo has been in recent trade talks, apparently, with the Chicago Cubs. I would love me some Jesus Luzardo. If you guys know me, you know I freaking love Jesus Luzardo. I think he is such a slept-on starter in Major League Baseball. I think he'd be an absolute dog for this Mets team. I really do. Coming off of a down, injury-riddled year, a southpaw that throws 97+. I mean, that's right. That's David Stearns' alley right there. I'm telling you guys, Jesus Luzardo can be Sean Manaea and then some. There's more upside than like ever. I'm so stubborn on Luzardo because I see this stuff. We've seen this stuff. We know how good he can be. He's shown it in stretches over the past 3 years. 2 of the past 3 years, he's been a pretty good starter in Major League Baseball. This past year, he was injury-riddled there with the shoulder as well, if I'm not mistaken. This is a guy, if healthy, he's only 27 years of age, multiple years of control. This is our Walmart version of Garrett Crochet in the sense they ain't going to cost you nearly as much, and you're getting a controllable, young, potentially dominant southpaw at his best in this rotation. This is a guy that I will absolutely continue to roll out the red carpet for because I know it's not going to take as many assets to acquire him, one. And two, Sandy Alcantara from, say, you have there in the Miami Marlins as well. He's been very injury-riddled, but I know some fans wouldn't hate the idea of Alcantara. I'm sure the Marlins wouldn't hate the idea of trading him either, as he's been a big innings eater and went as best as a Cy Young caliber starter. My problem, though, with Alcantara has really been those injuries of recent years. I think that I really think that Don Mattingly just, ran him into the ground down. There's a reason why Alcantara was going deep into games like consistently when no one else was. I think that's something that's going to continue to come back to bite him in the butt. I hope I'm wrong, but I do have my reservations with Alcantara a bit more funny enough than I do even Jesus Luzardo. But those are a lot of the trade targets that are kind of not necessarily full-on reported targets. Some of them have been reported, others have been speculated. Reportedly, we know that Castillo has been that big one that has stood out right now, and he's a guy that, again, would do wonders for this Mets rotation if they could get the job done. And when we talk about this Mets rotation, to put a cap on it, let's talk about some free agent targets and the latest on them here briefly. In Sean Manaea, in Walker Buehler, in Nick Pivetta, and anyone else that has been available in the current free agent market. What we know right now, everybody, the Mets aren't biting. The Mets aren't biting. So here is what is happening, simply put. Everyone that wants to know. The Mets are not biting. So in the case of Sean Manaea, they want Sean back. But they don't want Sean back at, say, a guaranteed 4th year and or 5th year, right? They probably want Sean at most 3 years, potentially with a 4th year option. We'll see how it all pans out. But Sean Manaea is one of these guys with how the free agent market's going. If they can have it wait out longer where it only benefits them, they're going to do that. The same can be said with Pete Alonso. We're going to talk about him more in a second. But simply put, Alonso's market is not overly favorable right now. Alonso's market just lost another potential team targeting him in the Yankees after they acquired Cody Bellinger today. Did they potentially gain one in the Cubs? Yes, but the Cubs also need to show their willingness to spend. It's easy to trade guys, especially when you have a lopsided trade that heavily favored them for Kyle Tucker, even as a rental, in my opinion. I love that move for the Cubs. But that's one thing. Signing guys is another. So that's why I'm not sold on them when it comes to Alonso, but that is something to bear in mind. Needless to say, when it comes to where the Mets stand with Alonso, they're playing the long game to a degree, the same way that they are with Sean Manaea, the same way that they are with some others. And there is strategic reasoning as to why they're playing the long game based on what the current market complexion is. And this was a market right now that was red hot, that was saying, oh my goodness gracious, all these teams are heavily involved in Pete Alonso. We're going to find out a decision imminently or over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years, then 2, 3, 4, 5 days rather. Then that's a different discussion. Then you're like, all right, Mets, where the hell are you? If I haven't heard you're reportedly connected, yeah, you better be now. They have been heavily involved in the market. But in the case of Sean Manaea, this has been a steady process of, okay, we would love to bring you back, Sean. Congratulations on your wedding, being a newlywed and everything, but we have our line in the sand. Now, after bringing in Frankie Montas, one of his best friends, according to Frankie, there's a further reasoning to rekindle the relationship between the two teams if there wasn't one already. Manaea openly said publicly in his final closing statements leaving the Mets when playoffs ended for us in the LCS in LA, he, choked up with saying how much he loved it here and how much, that he would definitely like to return. I mean, there's no denying that. Now, the Mets are able to bring in a Sean Manaea, for example, or if they're able to bring in, say, a Walker Buehler, for example, or if they say want to bring in, let's see if I have him here or not, that's Sasaki. I mean, we would all love Roki Sasaki. Don't get me wrong. Taking Roki Sasaki every day of the week. There's Sasaki again there. I was trying to pull up Pivetta. Where did I put my Pivetta stats? There they are. Okay. And Nick Pivetta, who without having the comp picks tied to him at the 3rd and 6th round pick, which is why I don't see the Mets signing Pivetta, and that wasn't happening. Nick Pivetta is, in my opinion, one of the more appealing free agent targets out there. Love the K to walk ratio. The guy doesn't walk anyone at all. Tremendous strike zone. Tremendous command of the strike zone, rather. Can be utilized as a starter and a reliever. I like Pivetta a lot. I think he checks off almost too much boxes for this Mets team. But because of those damn comp picks tied to him, I just don't see a world where David Stearns would sign a short-term pitcher and Nick Pivetta doing that. I think there's an exception for certain pitchers out there, especially if they're helping win now, but it has to be beyond 1 year. Pivetta, I don't see it as enough right now. But even with Pivetta as an option out there, and as we highlighted Buehler and as we highlight all these others, the Mets actually, contrary to my initial belief, are looking like they may very well go down a route where they're landing at least one major starter in the free agent market, like a Buehler, like Pivetta, like Manaea, what have you, and the trade market, at least Castillo, what have you. But they could land two. Something that I really didn't think was a possibility because of David Stearns' remarks the other day, saying how it's, not necessarily a priority. It's not as much a necessity to land pitchers, but they're definitely involved in the market, especially for depth. I think if the Mets really want to stay true to the word on the quality aspect there, they have to make sure that they land one of Luis Castillo and those other similar types in the trade market, the ones in the free agent market that we reference, and then another, or at absolute worst, a starter type that has upside, whether it is a Mike Soroka, who was dominant as a reliever last year, but wasn't so great as a starter. Tremendous, stupid reliever numbers. Best freaking K per 9 that we saw as a reliever, facing at least 150 batters, not named Mason Miller last season, and was ahead of Edwin Diaz at like 39%. Pardon me, folks. 39% on the K rate, which is just absurd. But even having said that, I was initially, for a long period of time, one of those people that said the Mets are not going to land 2 starters. Now I'm inclined to believe that they are. I just don't know if that second starter is going to be of similar echelon as the previous one, or if they're both, or if one is going to be clearly more quality than the other. I'd imagine that would be the case. I think one is more so on the youth, the upside, if anything like that, on a shorter term deal potentially, when the other, I think, has the more upside, has the ace caliber stuff at his best, and has worse to say like a number 3 starter for you. Let's see in the chat here. Wardy, why the hell are we not making moves? Because again, it's a marathon, not a sprint when it comes to these things. It's a sprint when we know in the public eye that, okay, we're going to find out a decision by a certain time, like i.e. Soto, but it's not in the case of the Mets with this rotation pursuit when they know how other teams are actively pursuing pitching right now. And yes, I remember when I got champagne in my eyes. It was the best way to freaking go blind for a couple seconds. Let me get to some of your donations, everybody, before we further highlight more on the Mets pitching targets, as well as Alex Bregman, Pete Alonso, comparing, contrasting between the two, where the Mets stand, and other position player pursuits potentially this offseason. Not going to harp much on the bullpen tonight because we haven't really heard much on the bullpen. That's one of those things I think we'll find out more when it actually happens. Kevin with the $50 holla. Thank you so much for that, Kevin. That's very generous and kind of you. And guys, also meant to say this earlier, I plan to have a video and a live stream out today. Unfortunately, my schedule was not in my favor. Dad duties certainly do happen, and yes, it is filled with duty at times, no pun intended. I will be out with an early video for you guys tomorrow. It should be dropping no later than 1 p.m. Eastern. That is the goal. No later. I'm hoping it comes out between 11 to 1, somewhere in that range. I want to get it out fairly early. You guys will understand why. And yes, I will leave you a hint because I meant to post this video today. It is on a starting pitcher that is available. I'm not going to say if they're from the trade or the free agent market because that might spoil a little bit too much for you, depending on how much you guys have been following me. This is a pitcher that I have talked about plenty. This is a pitcher that I have talked about more in a pessimistic light than a optimistic light over the past 2 weeks at least. And there are reasons as to why that is starting to change. And I'm going to expand on that and why the Mets potentially have a maybe even a great opportunity to land said player. But we'll break that down more tomorrow. Kevin, thank you so much for the donation again with the $50 donation. Kevin says, hey, Wardy, been a while. Big picture stuff is next offseason. Tucker or Vlad, one step at a time. Don't spend it all and screw yourself out next free agency like them panic buyer 8 year for free to now Bellinger for 2 years with an old team. I agree with you wholeheartedly, Kevin. Kyle Tucker is absolutely amazing. I would love Kyle Tucker. I'd give him half a bill. I know that Steve Cohen wouldn't mind doing it. We'll talk about Kyle Tucker more when we get to next offseason. Vladdy is the big one because if the Mets don't bring back Alonso, you're going scorched earth for Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I'm going to say it right now. Mets fans. If the Mets do not bring back Pete Alonso somehow this offseason, I guarantee Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is the Mets starting first baseman for the 2026 season. I guarantee it. Clip this, quote me, the same way that I was quoted a year ago saying that Juan Soto would be a Met the night that Juan Soto was announced to land with the Yankees, is the same way that I promise you Vladimir Guerrero Jr. will be a New York Met on a long-term contract if he, in fact, is not traded elsewhere, throughout the season potentially, and in the case of the Mets, that they don't bring back the polar bear. I think Pete's coming back. I feel fairly confident saying that. Probably more confident than a little bit from, say, a month plus ago. Now it goes in hand with landing Soto. But that's where I stand on that front as of now. Thank you so much for the donation. Angus, thank you for the dollar donation earlier. Peter, Bregman, and Vientos at first. Thank you so much for the donation. We're going to talk about Pete and Bregman as well here in a second, my man. Scott H, great. Scott H, thank you so much for the $5 holla. Scott says, Pete for 5 years or Vlad for 10. Burns on a 4-year high AAV. Can't believe people still don't trust Stearns. 4 years, I don't see why Burns would want to go 4 if he's going short term. Considering he's already 29-30, I think it would make most sense for Burns to go at most 3 if he's going short-term high AAV, and that is something we may in fact expand on in the future. But Scott H, thank you for that donation. P for 5 years, I'm not opposed to at all. I think that's a really nice meeting in the middle. Obviously, the best number would be 3 or 4, but 5 is fine. Brings him to his age, 35 season or so, age 36. That's a good realm for him as a first baseman, and how they tend to grade out by that time. Vladdy, I would love as well, but Vladdy's also fluctuated a bit over the past couple years in his production, and I could see some concern long-term if you invest a decade along to him. Not to say I wouldn't be for it, but I see the pros and cons like anything else. Straight Talk with Jack Grant with a $20 haul. Thank you so much. Remember, a year ago, we did not know what we were getting for Sevy and Sean. LGM David S. is quality. Thank you so much for the donation. I appreciate that, and I agree regarding Stearns. Appreciate the donation, appreciate your membership, and I appreciate you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Let's go up here. John Rousey, $2 holla. Marte for a bullpen arm still possible? Absolutely. Also got to realize just because stuff was reported and nothing happened immediately after doesn't mean it won't happen. It's been reported now publicly because it is something that the Mets are continuing to ponder. Someone please explain to me how pitching is not important. Stearns, how is that not a priority? You have to understand context. To suggest that David Stearns doesn't prioritize pitching when he has been notoriously known for fantastic development of pitching since his time as assistant GM with the Astros tells me a lot about what you're not focusing on, in my opinion, humbly, and what you should be. And what you should be has been the track record of what Stearns is trying to do with the lab that we have built, and to not only churn out in-house talent, but also strategic on spending. If you know David Stearns, then you know he probably views these starters more along the lines of running backs, where you're not going to invest long-term on just any starter just for the sake of, oh, I have rotation spots open. No, you do it in the right circumstance in the right spot. I think that there's an argument to be had, obviously, in the likes of Corbin Burns long-term. I know you guys feel that way. I can tell you why it more than likely won't happen, that we reiterate constantly. But on the shorter-term end, that is where the Mets have a lot of opportunity. So much so, and probably greater than most teams in Major League Baseball on their willingness to outspend the next team on high AAV. Funny enough, the Mets are perfectly primed to go sign Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer right now. I know you guys don't want to hear it, but it is a funny thing to make note of. Before we share more on Alonso and everything here in just a second, everybody, Ken Rosenthal just came out with a new piece, so I'm just double-checking real quick to make sure that I didn't miss any potential keynotes regarding the Mets, because he has mentioned the Mets, including Luis Castillo, being involved in the trade rumors without publicly stating right away the Mets are one team showing interest in Castillo. Let's see here. More on the Yanks. Who wants Santander? Nothing new. Nothing in Ken Rosenthal's latest piece on the Mets, just to save you guys a click in case you want to check it out. Wardy, what is Walker Buehler's market right now? From what I've been told, Walker Buehler's market right now has been essentially what it was from a couple weeks ago. Like, it seems like it's starting to build up now, which is good, but it's not looking anywhere beyond maybe a 3-year deal. Maybe that third year being an option, but I think Buehler's going to get short-term, fairly high AAV depending on where he goes, at least 20 mil AAV, obviously. Death in Spades with a $2 donation. Thank you so much. Percentage, if the Mets re-sign Pete next offseason, sign Vladdy for third, 0% chance, because Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is not a third baseman, and we should stop acting like he really ever was one consistently. No, he'll be a first base / DH man, DH for the remainder of his career, more than likely. Your ADHD needs signings now? Now, that I can relate with. As someone who struggles with ADHD as much as I do as well, that I understand. We're on the same wavelength there. But in all seriousness, to talk now, to kind of put a cap on this, let's get into the big ones. Pete Alonso and Alex Bregman. Let's see. Stearns is a G. Wardy actually right. They're negotiating. Oh, I know. A lot of teams. Stearns is negotiating with players and teams right now that you have no clue of. And this is not something I say in confidence because of what I know throughout the industry. It's common sense. This is how this works throughout the offseason, especially this time of year. It is so unbelievably busy. But now let's talk a bit about where the Mets stand with Alonso, where maybe they stand with Bregman. And according to Will Salmon, and shout out to my guy Jacob Piccini, who did a fantastic job with this Alex Bregman Mets swap that I posted on X a day or so ago when the Bregman rumors first started. By the way, Bregman rumors were reaffirmed today through SNY per Mark Feinsand initially of MLB.com. The Mets are among teams pursuing Alex Bregman. We covered that on the channel over 48 hours ago already, so they're late. We're not. We got you covered here. Check out that video if you haven't already. Has almost 18,000 views, I think. So if you go in the recent videos, I think it's our second or third latest video on the platform. Just double check there. Hi, AV. Let's see. Wardy said hi, AV equals Daniel. I don't know, Daniel. I guess we'll have to talk about it more in the near future and see how you feel then. Where the offseason ain't over yet, but can you rank the NL East as it stands right now? No, Mikey. Respectfully, I'm not going to because there's no point. I don't know what the point is in ranking things before we're at where we're going to be, right? I'll rank things when it's time to rank things. Nor do I really care that much either, because rankings never mean anything in comparison to reality a lot of times. You know, I don't need the Mets to win the division. I just need the Mets to have a deep run this year like they did last year. That's all I want from them. They don't gotta win the division. Furthermore, I think them not winning the division, being an underdog all year is exactly why they made playoffs. I think the Mets absolutely roll over and die within seconds if they were in 2024 winning the division consistently at any point in time. It was a recipe for failure, just like 2022 if that was the case. But regardless, from Will Salmon the Athletic here, says he doesn't see Alex Bregman as a fit for the Mets due to the contract projections at 7 years, 185. And all that was a segment on the show there through SNY, so I apologize for that. But expand on this. I agree wholeheartedly. Alex Bregman only makes sense to the Mets, in my opinion, if we're going to be going on a 5-year range, maybe high AV, but 5 years is probably as far as I'd be willing to go for Alex Bregman. 6-7 year range where he's certainly going to want. He wants to ink somewhere long term where he could potentially spend the remainder of his career. Bregman just doesn't feel that way here. And I will say there were many things about Bregman that I honestly had wrong in my just perception of him, especially the splits in Houston versus Citi Field. Houston, Minute Maid Park allows on average 5 more home runs for Alex Bregman on a year-by-year basis if he played every game in that ballpark. If he played every game in Citi Field, he'd have pretty much identical numbers home run-wise to what he would otherwise have with the Astros throughout a normal 162. And what's interesting about that is it shows you that Alex Bregman's performance and the way he hits home runs actually does go in hand with Citi Field, because there was nothing different than last year. Bregman had 26 home runs last year, and lo and behold, we come to find out that at Citi Field, per Baseball Savant, he would have had 26 home runs if he was in that exact same position. Bregman, who's not only a multi-time World Series champion, cheating scandal, and then not cheating scandal aside, is a guy who has been one of the more consistent third basemen in Major League Baseball since his breakout in the 2017-2018 range. But the reason why there are fans that are not in favor of Alex Bregman is in part because they say, hey, it's Breggy or it's Alonso. It's not both. And this goes directly in hand with our conversations that we had on the platform going back over this past month when the Mets were initially showing interest in Willy Adames, potentially out of position as a third baseman as a shorter-term higher AAV, shifting Vientos to first base and or DH based on Alonso's future. But listen, there's a world where the Mets could actually bring back Alonso and bring in Bregman. I think that would be the best world to shore up everything, not only for Alonso, but to have Bregman, then you have a guaranteed both offense and defensive dynamo there out of the hot corner. When I say dynamo, I mean, yes, if you're hitting 25 home runs on pace a year, 70 to 90 RBIs, you're giving a respectable OPS in that 800 range or higher, and you're giving us Gold Glove defense, that's pretty much all I could ask for from someone at the shift Vientos to be an everyday DH. That would be the lone exception, in my opinion. You do it because you're prioritizing your team defense. Bregman would make this team's defense 10 times better at the hot corner. Alex Bregman was one of the best defensive third basemen in Major League Baseball last year, whereas Mark Vientos was amongst the league's worst. Not to say that Vientos can't get out of a rut and be a better defender than what we've seen at this point, because he certainly can. Brett Beatty proved us how much better he can learn in 1 year defensively that we saw in his 50-game sample this past year versus what we saw the year prior. But it's not a certainty, and you have to wonder how much of those boxes does David Stearns and the Mets want to check off on certainties in this win-now stage. Francisco Lindor is right at the peak of his prime. He's not getting any younger. Brandon Nimmo, same applies. Edwin Diaz, same applies. Kodai Senga, same applies. Pete Alonso, if you bring it back, same applies. So with the initial core that the Mets have built as is, excluding Vientos, the Alvarez's, and the youngsters there, the Mets know they only have so much years with this key core window. Further reason as to why they should make sure that while they're being strategic about their spending, also be diligent, also be willing to go that extra mile, that extra step. Because in a case of Bregman, who I will say is not my favorite choice at all. I've never been overly head over heels over Alex Bregman as a player. But do I think that he would make this Mets team better? Especially if they prioritize the defensive aspect here and shifted Vientos as a full-time DH. Should you bring Alonso back? I would absolutely love that. But the reason why I don't see it happening is simply from what's been widely reported at this point, is that it appears that it's going to be, oh, audio's cutting. Hold on, everybody. My apologies for the audio hookup, everybody. I think we're good now. I recommend refreshing your live stream in case there's a continued issue there. Let me know in the chat if the audio sounds better now, everybody. I like to think that it does. If it doesn't, though, then I apologize. Kevin, thank you so much for the donation, too. I really appreciate that. I've looked at the chat. Let me know. Are we good? You guys see everything? Are we rocking and rolling and ready to go so I can continue to break down Alex Bregman and Pete Alonso? Let me know in a minute, and then we'll get back into it. Getting a thumbs up. Sound is fine. Okay. Refresh the live stream, everybody. In case the audio is still cutting for you, just refresh it. I promise you that is the only reason why it's still cutting out for you. Just refresh it. Hold on. Audio's fine. Audio's fine, everybody. Okay, the reel back in. Alex Bregman. Pros. A lot more defense there at the hot corner. Coming off of one of him, not his best defensive year, mind you. Funny enough, it's a walker, so we'll see how consistent that is. A guy that brings championship pedigree, still at a young age of 30, so very much still in the prime of his career. You're getting a lot of upside still in Alex Bregman right now. Cons. It may be an Alonso or Bregman situation. And in that circumstance, I'm still taking the polar bear Pete Alonso back. As much as you could argue Bregman brings more value to the Mets based on his defensive upside, I would rightfully argue that the clubhouse culture and dynamic would be so negatively impacted should you lose Alonso. Alonso is such a key part and focal point of this team on and off the field as a homegrown talent that I think to a degree you'd be setting a bad precedent going forward of how the Mets are perceived. And that aspect, if they come off, going about the wrong way with Alonso at all. I think they're going to bring Pete back. I think even with Bregman, you still want more power protection. I think in those circumstances, you absolutely want more power protection. And that's where Alonso, in my opinion, trumps the two. When you have Alonso that in any given year can give you 40 home runs, 110 plus RBIs when he's right, especially with Soto, has same lineup as him now. Like, we haven't even seen that potential yet, right? This could be just a start for Alonso. What all things considered, rolling out consistent, tremendous home run hitting years. I'd love both. I'd start there. I would love Alex Bregman, and I would love Pete Alonso. But I don't see it happening with the both of them. If it happens, I'd imagine Alonso is the one between the two to come back. And speaking of Alonso, I think he really wants to come back to the Mets. But the Mets just aren't rushing things because of where they currently stand at this point in time this offseason. That's okay. I think the Mets are going to get where they want to be with Alonso. I think they're going to both reach a number they're happy about. I think we're going to find out reportedly that Alonso turned down more money elsewhere to come back to the Mets. That is just my humble opinion. That is not something that was reported, nor is that something that I've heard through my industry sources I know and I've spoken on in confidence. This is just my gut feeling. I have a strong belief that the Mets will bring back Alonso. He will turn down contract offers from elsewhere that might have been honestly more beneficial even for him and his family because how much you want to be back with the Mets. So that is what I have to say on the polar bear, everybody. And that is also what I have to say on the latest in Mets land. So D-Mac, thank you so much for the $5 donation. What's the view on Vientos' ability to improve his defense at third? Hopeful. Definitely hopeful. He's working his tail off for sure, and Vientos will continue to get better. Vientos really wasn't much of a defensive liability in the regular season as he was in the postseason, but that's something where the Mets need to make sure he can handle that pressure, and we can't have ourselves shooting ourselves in the foot where, oh my God, our young star third baseman, slugging-wise, in Vientos is so bad defensively, he's costing us runs here in the NLCS. Have to avoid that, obviously. I think we're going to try to do that, which is why we've been connected to Adames, is why we're connected to Bregman. And I'm going to tell you right now, I don't expect us to land Bregman. So if we do, cool, awesome. I'll be excited about that then. But he's one of those I think is more so the Mets was considering the idea, when in reality, they're not going to go to Bregman unless Breggy now has an interest on kind of meeting more of the needs of the Mets than himself. Bregman will likely prioritize the top dollar in the longest term. Should that be the case, I don't see him coming to the Mets. I could see a team overpaying. I could even see a team like the Detroit Tigers to rekindle that relationship with Bregman and A.J. Hinch to kind of kickstart their window now as a playoff caliber team to make that happen as well. Again, not saying it's going to, but it's definitely a possibility, everybody. D-Mac, thank you for that donation. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Unfortunately, my audio has still been an issue for some of you guys, but I am going to wrap up the show now, so it's perfect timing. Thank you guys all so much for watching and listening. You guys are amazing. Please smash a like and subscribe on your way out. Let me know your biggest takeaways on the latest Big Mets updates here at Metsland. We will be back tomorrow with both a video and a live stream to cover the latest in Metsland. Not only having to deal with other players the Mets are potentially seeking right now, we're going to further deep dive a pitcher tomorrow that we haven't talked about in a deeper dive format much on the channel this offseason, and we'll get into that more, as well as other news that will inevitably happen from now up until late tomorrow night. The Mets, I'm promising you, we will find out more rumblings on tomorrow, either more reported targets that they're showing interest in, or actual moves that they have made, whether that's on the lower level move or on a bigger move than even what we could sit here and try to assume to this point. So thank you guys again. Let me know your thoughts down below. I hope you all have a tremendous rest of your night, day, evening, or whenever you're watching this. And I also do apologize if I didn't get to as many comments as I would have liked to today. Once we're back live tomorrow or the following day, I'm hoping to have more comments answered for you guys in the live chat. Love you guys. Let's go Mets, baby. Peace out.